The Handkerchief by Great 78. Chapter 30. A Moonlit Flight. In the end, for all of the concern about backlash against Potter over the article, there hadn't been much need for his advance apology. Umbridge read the article in the Quibbler and became incensed, forbidding anyone from reading or discussing it, and banning it from school grounds. Of course, that meant that everyone had their own copy, including everyone in Slytherin House. But no one was able to admit that they had read it, so the muttering and complaining stayed within Slytherin. Vince and Greg were especially aggrieved, vowing retribution, though they did not use such large words to describe their annoyance. Draco sat with them in the library as they looked over at Potter and Hermione, shooting them ugly looks and occasionally punching their big meaty fists into their other hand threateningly. Draco wasn't too concerned. Vince and Greg may have size on their side, but Potter could hold his own in a duel, he was sure. And if he got a little roughed up, that was the price Potter had to pay, he smirked to himself. Why don't you focus on your potions revision, and not worry about what Scarface has to say? Draco asked them pointedly. Both of them were barely scraping by with an acceptable in most of their classes, due in large part to Draco's help with their assignments. "Your father was named too, Draco," Greg reminded him, as though he might have forgotten. "Yes, but no one pays attention to the rantings of a lunatic," Draco answered, tilting his head at Potter. He turned back to his arithmancy essay and continued until the end of the paragraph. Then, restless and anxious to speak with Hermione, he looked up once again, giving Potter a hard sneer, until the other wizard looked back down at his own essay. Hermione finally looked up and caught his eye. He touched his handkerchief lightly in his pocket, then withdrew it, whispering the password almost silently. Pretending to wipe his nose, he spoke. "Runes." She yawned and stretched, covering her mouth delicately with her handkerchief. She looked down at it and nodded slowly. This time it was Draco who stood first, gathering his things and walking as though towards the exit. At the last moment he peeled off to the left, taking the perimeter path around the back of the library and the ancient runes section. Hermione arrived a moment later, but he did not see her so much as smell the gardenia and cherry scent. Suddenly a pair of hands reached out, grabbing him around the waist. The sight of it was surreal, even if it had not been entirely unexpected. "I borrowed this from Harry to sneak Rita Skeeter from the train platform to the Three Broomsticks back on Valentine's Day. She's fallen on hard times lately, poor thing. She can't write, you see. Funny, it's a bit of a writer's block. She, of course, was a bit embarrassed about her appearance. She didn't want all of the shopkeepers and the people on the high street to see her." Draco could hear the mocking derision in Hermione's voice, and smiled to himself. Her hands withdrew back into the cloak, and Draco turned towards the shelf behind him, feeling a brush of motion on his side that indicated that she'd come around him, and was standing between him and the shelf. "So, what are you planning to do with this wonderful cloak before you return it to its rightful owner, Miss Granger?" he murmured quietly. "I thought I might take a moonlit stroll." "Would you like company?" he asked, pretending to read aloud to himself from one of the books on the shelves. "I'd love it." "Let's go." He turned quickly, shouldering his bag, and going the long way back around the perimeter of the library to the exit. "Draco, I thought you'd left. Aren't you going to help me with this potions revision?" It was Vince, and Draco silently cursed at him for slowing him down. "Sorry, mate. Something suddenly came up." Draco turned quickly on his heel and walked out, and could have sworn he heard barely suppressed giggles from somewhere on his right. Down the stairs to the entrance hall, Draco stepped into a broom cupboard, dropping his bag inside. A moment later she appeared, still silently giggling. "What's got you tickled, witch?" he asked playfully, grabbing her round the hips and pulling her close. "There's this old muggle television show. Never mind, it would take too long to explain. It was just funny what you'd said about something suddenly coming up." she laughed. "Get your mind out of the cellar, Granger," he joked. He waited a moment whilst she settled the invisibility cloak around them both. He had to stoop slightly because of his height, but it covered them both completely. He leaned back down to kiss her fiercely on the cheek, hugging her to him. It was their first chance to see each other alone in weeks. Thankfully, the front doors to the castle were close by, and a quick unlocking spell had them open. They stepped through into the cool February night. Stars sparkled above, reflecting in the black lake below them. The whomping willows' lazily drifting branches caused the moonlight to dapple as it fell across the lawn in long stripes. Far in the other direction, the tops of 6 golden hoops could be seen gleaming in the night sky. Hermione shivered. "It's a bit cool for walking by the lake. There's the greenhouses." But Draco had known exactly where he wanted to take her, the moment he noticed the golden gleam. Taking her by the hand, he jerked his head in a "follow me" gesture, and took off for the Quidditch pitch. She followed along, demanding to know where they were headed, but when they reached the Quidditch pitch and found the team locker rooms unlocked, she balked. "No, Draco, no!" Because now she'd noticed him rummaging through the storeroom, searching for the best school broom there was to be had in the collection. "It's not going to be my Nimbus 2001, but it'll be better than nothing," he muttered to himself. "I'm not!" she protested louder. "Clean sweeps have a cleaner tail line, but the comets can accommodate an extra passenger better, I think," he continued, almost to himself. "Draco!" She grabbed each side of his face, pulling him until they were practically nose to nose. "I am not riding a broom." "Why not?" He gave her his most forlorn, sad Kneazle look. "I don't like flying." "Do you doubt that I can fly with you, or riding on the broom with me?" "Well, no, I'm sure—" "Do you think I'd let you fall?" No. But do you think I'd ever let anything hurt you, Hermione?" This time she looked him directly in the eyes. "No, Draco, I don't. I would never." "Never," he swore. He put his own hands on her cheeks, caressing her chin in his thumbs. "I could never let anything hurt you. Not if it's in my power to stop it." Their eyes met, silver to copper. "I know." She drew in a deep breath. "Okay." "Okay. Okay." Broom selected, they made their way to the pitch, lightning fairies lighting the way as they danced in the freshly mown grass that sprang like a thick, lush carpet beneath their feet. Draco climbed on, then gestured to Hermione to get on behind him. Her hands settled tentatively at the sides of his waist, but he grabbed her hands and wrapped them firmly around his torso, pulling her close on his back. As they kicked off, her grip got much tighter. He chuckled, turning back to smirk at her. "Eyes forward, Malfoy! Watch where you're going! And stay low!" He stayed low, winding slowly just below the golden hoops of the Quidditch pitch, turning lazy figure eights in the night sky. When she seemed comfortable, he sped up slightly, and chanced soaring a bit over the forbidden forest. At one point he glimpsed the herd of Thestrals circling about a quarter mile away, but he did not point them out to her because he knew she could not see them. Then he brought them low over the black lake. As the toes of their shoes nearly skimmed the water, they saw a large tentacle break the surface and trace their shadow, which flew in front of them, cast by the moonlight. They returned to the pitch, and he slowed to nearly a crawl at the hoops, circling between them. Each swoop brought her arms tight once more, a feeling Draco thought he'd never get tired of. He rose back into the air, turning ovals in the sky, just enjoying the feel of the wind on his face and his witch's arms around his heart. After 20 minutes or so, when he felt her head relax against his back, he began bringing them back down. She startled at the change in direction, and he could feel her arms and legs tighten around him as the ground grew closer. But they landed lightly, with no bumps, and Draco helped her off the broom gently. They were just at the edge of the pitch, next to the small awnings that covered teams taking time-outs during rainstorms. The lightning fairies had congregated here, drawn perhaps by the stir she and Draco had made in the air. "That was wonderful," she gushed, removing the barrette in her hair to retighten her ponytail, collecting all of the strands that had come loose in the wind. "So, we can do it again, a different day?" he asked eagerly. "We can take my Nimbus. It's a much smoother ride, I promise, and you won't even notice the acceleration jumps." "No, I never said that," she answered sharply to his amusement. "Never say never," he murmured as he leaned forward, capturing her mouth with his own, slotting their lips together gently. She leaned into him with a breathless moan, and the sound made him hungry for her. He pulled back slightly. "Stay here with me a while, Hermione," he whispered softly. "Of course, Draco," she murmured back, winding her fingers in the hair at the nape of his neck. Her eyes looked up at his, both reflecting their emotions in the moonlight. Chapter 31. Nobody expects the Toadish Inquisition. Draco backed her up slowly to the awning, reaching out to pull the ties that held the curtain walls open. The curtains fell closed, trapping a few of the lightning fairies in the space with them. The warm, orange glow played across Hermione's face, making her lovely copper eyes sparkle playfully. She withdrew her handkerchief from her cuff, laying it on the ground and casting an engorgement charm on it. It grew to cover a large part of the freshly clipped green grass, providing a clean space to sit, which she did. Draco settled beside her. "Hermione, I know it's been an insane year. I hate that things with Umbridge and Potter have gotten so contentious. I hate that she's essentially here at the behest of my father." "It certainly has been a difficult situation, although I suppose it's given Harry someone else to hate besides you," she joked. He laughed his agreement. She shivered a bit, and Draco cast a strong warming charm on the two of them, tucking her in close to him to share his body heat. Tentatively, he brought his hand up to caress her neck, and leaning in to kiss her once more. They kissed for what must have been several minutes, though it hadn't seemed nearly very long to Draco. She pulled away to catch her breath, and Draco laid back on the blanket to stare up at her, reveling in her familiar gardenia and cherry scent. He gently pulled one curl to straighten it, watching in fascination as it recoiled back into shape. "You're so beautiful," he murmured as he stared, transfixed. I care for you so much." She shivered again, and he realized that his warming charms were wearing off quickly, due to the cold night. "Should we go back in?" he asked. "Not just yet," she said, lying down on her side next to him. He rolled to face her. They lay that way, face to face, occasionally kissing in the comfortable silence, Hermione rubbing her hand along his shoulders and arm, him stroking her curls and down her body, his darkened silver eyes looking longingly, openly, into bright copper ones. After a time, the warming charms began to dissipate once more, and Hermione shivered again. He drew the transfigured blanket up around her shoulders, and she smiled at him. "You really do never know when you're going to need a handkerchief, do you?" She quirked an eyebrow at him. He chuckled heartily and hugged her to him, pressing his longing body to her as she did the same to him. He knew that she could feel exactly how much he wanted her, but he didn't care. This witch really would be the death of him. Reluctantly, she said, "I suppose we should head back inside. Curfew started already." He ended the transfiguring spell on her handkerchief-turned blanket. He stretched the cuff of her cardigan gently, tucking the folded square inside reverently. He looked up to find her watching him with what looked like adoration. He knew that there was nothing in this world that he would not do to keep this witch as his own. The walk back into the castle had been trickier than their exit. The moon now glowed brighter, which meant that they were more likely to be seen. As it was now hours after curfew, they used the invisibility cloak as soon as they exited the Quidditch pitch. They walked closely to each other, arm in arm. Miraculously, The castle door was unlocked, so no charm or knock was needed to get inside. She left him at the top of the staircase down to the dungeons, leaving him with one last, long, lingering kiss. "Message me once you're in your room, safe," he asked of her, and agreed to do the same for her. He watched where he knew she was under the cloak, then turned to sneak down the stairs. As he rounded the final corner, a chilling sight greeted him. He felt his mind go blank, and his gut knotted anxiously in momentary fright at the sight of the squat, toad-like woman who stood just outside the entrance to the Slytherin common room.
"Ah, Mr. Malfoy, there you are. Doing prefect rounds, I presume?"
Professor Umbridge stared at him, waiting for his answer. Draco breathed again, a small sigh of relief. He had been the second prefect of record on duty tonight, but he had no doubt that Ernie had completed the rounds dutifully without him. "Yes, Professor," he answered calmly, taking a deep breath. Suddenly, he had an irrational fear. Could she smell Hermione's gardenia scent on him? He felt sick, thinking he might have put her in danger.
"Excellent, Malfoy. I have a proposal for you. As High Inquisitor, it's my duty to ensure that Hogwarts is run with the utmost integrity. I cannot abide by rule-breaking, particularly the rules that I, with the Minister's backing, of course, have established. It's come to my attention that rule-breaking has continued, however, even amongst the prefects. Have you noticed any such behavior, Mr. Malfoy?"
"No, Professor," he stated firmly. The fact that he did know, indeed, of such rule-breaking meant nothing. He could look this witch in the face and lie with the greatest of ease, if needed. As if to remind him of the fellow rule-breaker he knew best, his breast pocket warmed briefly from his handkerchief. Good, he thought. She was safe inside her dormitory.
"That's wonderful to hear. I am certain that no member of Slytherin House would ever break school rules."
She smiled totally.
"And of course they always go the extra measure to ensure everything is as it should be. I'm certain that's why you were patrolling outside of the castle doors tonight, not just the usual route inside. I know that's what you were doing because I've checked your room and the prefect route myself, and you weren't there. So you had to have been patrolling outdoors. Isn't that right, Mr. Malfoy?" she asked sweetly. His breath caught. They'd been so stupid.
"Yes, Professor Umbridge, that's correct."
"That's why I left the front doors unlocked for you, so that you could re-enter easily without having to call anyone," she said smoothly.
"Thank you, Professor Umbridge. That was most kind of you."
"It was, wasn't it? Now, as I provided a kindness to you, I hope that you can do the same for me. You see, I've been thinking about forming a small group of students, very selective, of course, to help me enforce the rules here at Hogwarts. I'm hoping I can count on you, Mr. Malfoy, to head up this group and to find the appropriate members to join and help us with this endeavor."
Draco closed his eyes for just a moment, then opened them to look into her dull brown ones. "Of course, Professor Umbridge, it would be my pleasure to help you." Draco exhaled a huge breath he didn't realize he'd been holding when he drew his bed hangings in his dormitory after leaving Umbridge. An inquisitorial squad, for Merlin's sake. What crazy shite would she invent next? And it was evidently up to Draco to form the group. He was conflicted. He'd rather put people he felt he could trust. If he put Blaise and Theo on the squad, though, Umbridge might realize he wasn't serious about it. Blaise avoided all responsibilities and discussions that might have even a whiff of controversy. Theo took nothing seriously. He'd have to choose some fellow Slytherins that could be counted on to follow blindly. Vince and Greg were obvious choices. Millie had been dating Greg for some time now, and Draco felt sure she'd follow Greg's lead. Tracy was too shrewd, and would see through the whole thing as a farce that it was. Plus, she was likely too busy, as she was involved in so many school clubs. Pansy was generally awful, but was also someone he knew well enough to make sure that she would put herself first, Umbridge's wishes second, especially if he asked her to look the other way on anything. Miles was too sensitive and wouldn't handle the pressure well. Montague and Warrington were slightly more sentient versions of Vince and Greg, and liked Draco well enough since they were on the Quidditch team together. Draco flopped back onto his bed, wondering how a night that had begun so amazingly could finish so rottenly. He was indebted to Umbridge, of all people. He didn't just owe her. He'd been strong-armed into agreeing to be her eyes and ears, a spy amongst the students. His handkerchief warmed in his pocket, and he opened it to read. "Are you okay? Did you get back to your room safely?" He breathed in, then out, heavily, and responded, "Yes, I'm here. Ran into Umbridge. Got away with everything, but there's going to be a price to pay." There was always a price, it seemed.
Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Handkerchief by Great 78.